So we wanted to create something that was general enough that every step family could get something out of it.
Yeah.
But specific enough so that it wasn't, it's just like they couldn't create their own ideas. We needed to have some specific aspects to it.
Thank you for joining us and welcome to another Family Care Learning podcast. My name is Brandon Jones and I am the Director of Clinical Services with Arizona Family Counseling and Christian Family Care. For those of you watching, I'm so excited about what we're going to be talking about today. One, because it affects me personally, but two, I think it addresses such a really important aspect of strengthening families that AFC is growing into. And so today I have with me Steve, who is a therapist of Arizona Family Counseling, and his wife Deanna. And they have had the opportunity to serve and minister hundreds of couples in their marriages, but not just any kind of marriage. Really, they're leaning into step families or blended families, or as they like to call them, merged families. And so, Steve and Deanna, thank you so much for joining us here today. For those of you that are watching, I would love for you I want to encourage you, think about those families that there are so many merged families all around us. And sometimes we're not even aware of it. We don't really think of it. But I really think this is going to be a series of podcasts that could be super encouraging for those people that you love, that you care about, that that are a part of a merged family. And so would you just maybe start off by sharing, so you've made this curriculum. Can you talk a little bit about kind of how that started and what you kind of noticed were needs that caused you to create this?
Sure.
Go ahead.
You go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Deanna and I had gotten involved with step family ministry, as we called it back then, years and years ago, and we had then were asked to take over the ministry. And when we did, the ministry actually started to grow. Not by anything we were really doing, but God was really growing the ministry in that transition period. And we had a bunch of small groups. We had probably about 7 or 8 small groups with leaders that were seasoned leaders that had been in small group with us.
Yeah.
And we were sending more and more couples to their small groups, as they would come in and say, hey, we'd really like to get involved in this ministry. And so we'd send them over there. And all of a sudden we started getting reports from the leadership team stating that, hey, we need to figure something out here, because as you send us new people, we're having to stop whatever we're doing in our small group and go back to the beginning and teach these people everything that you guys taught us. And it was really disruptive in some ways.
Yeah.
They were willing to do it,
yeah,
but they just thought that there was a better way. And so the leadership team came to us and said, well, would you guys consider writing a curriculum and teaching a class?
Actually, they said we needed to put the new couples through a boot camp. And I'm like, I think the boot camp might be a little bit harsh.
But there's terminology. I mean, they wanted to. It's like they didn't know the terminology. They didn't know the lingo. They didn't, a lot of the things that couples needed to know coming into it, and it was making it difficult.
Yeah.
So then what we did is we decided to sit down with the leadership team and say, okay, guys, you want this to happen. Let's do this together.
Yeah.
And so we spent an entire summer, once a week, and we met as a leadership team, and we're like, okay, what are the most important things that need to be in this?
Yeah. Yeah.
And we just brainstormed as a group. And then Deanna and I took that, and from there, over the next, it probably took a good year to start developing curriculum, just even developing into an outline format.
Yeah.
And then eventually we turned it into classes that were taught.
Wow. And so I think that's what a blessing. Like thinking about years ago when this happened, right? Like a lot of prayer, a lot of time and energy, kind of collaboration between pastors and people have walked through this journey. And so for those of you out there that are just going, I wonder if this is helpful. It's just crazy thinking about how God led you through this development, and there are people watching now that are going to hopefully benefit from this and strengthening their family years after this process. And so would you talk a little bit about, like a lot of churches have marriage ministries. What are some of the unique things that you were kind of learning or finding with these couples that were step families, merged families, that just kind of made the needs a little different?
I'll take this one.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
So when you get married the first time and there are no children involved, the main issues are probably going to be finances. They're going to be, who squishes the toothpaste from the bottom and who squishes it from the middle.
Yeah.
I'm a middle squisher.
Okay. Oh, man.
That's why we have separate tubes.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's like
Works.
basic marriage 101, right?
Yeah, right.
But when you bring children into a step family and you go through the regular marriage counseling, what doesn't come into effect is dealing with a former spouse. So Steve was married prior. He brought 3 girls into our marriage, and his first wife and he were not at the best co-parenting level that they eventually got to. In fact, it was pretty bad.
Yeah.
Whereas when I came in with my daughter, my first husband was nowhere to be seen. So while yes, we represent some types of step families, the mainstream information wasn't gonna work for us.
No, in fact, we were finding out that couples that would go through, even if it was just pastoral counseling, I don't want to say pastoral, lay counseling.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't necessarily the pastors that were counseling, but going through lay counseling through the church, everybody was counseling them based on a nuclear family dynamic.
Yeah.
And an ideal.
And the ideal
instead of the real
marriage.
Yeah.
But that wasn't the truth in a step family.
Yeah.
Is the ideal doesn't exist anymore.
Yep.
Now we're trying to recreate a new ideal. And don't get me wrong, everything is biblical that we teach.
Right.
And we spent many, many years actually working this out with pastoral staff. And making sure that everything was agreeable within the church itself.
Yeah.
And that was very important to us. We did not want to be considered renegades that were trying to teach some philosophy that goes outside of the church.
Right. It was non-biblical.
Right.
And it's so interesting, right? Because with step families, being a child of a step family, and even just hearing some of the discussion about going to church and those different things, there can be a sense, I think, sometimes of like, we're kind of less than, or there's guilt and shame, which I think if we're honest, that's an area where Satan kind of attacks, right? It's through this shame of that. And to have a ministry that goes, I'm meeting you right where you're at in the unideal living circumstances that we all live in and go through. But like that feels a lot like how Jesus meets us, right? In our brokenness, in our struggle, and patiently works with us. And so I love that you have poured so much thought and energy into this curriculum. And so the title of the curriculum that is this Developing a Healthy Merged Family. So can you kind of share just what the material covers?
Yeah, sure. So what originally when we created this curriculum and we created it through the church, we used the acronym or the across. I always get those wrong. Acronym, acrostic. Which one is it?
Yeah.
But we used the term steps. Okay. But it was all designed, scripturally based, everything for the church. And it stood for surrender, train, embrace, prepare, and share. So it was a 5-step process. And what it was is there's a lot of great curriculum. There's a lot of great books that are written on step families or blended families. Those are the 2 most common terms.
And then there are a lot of terrible books.
There are a lot of books
out there
that are not what we would recommend, but there are a lot of great ones. So we're not trying to reinvent the wheel here, but what we saw as we were sitting down with our leadership team was that there is a process that every family does go through. We don't all face the same things as step families. Every step family is different. Every step family is unique in their own way. A lot of it has to do with the family dynamics,
Yeah.
And whether co-parenting is workable or not workable between
Right.
the former spouses. But so what we saw is began to see this process taking place that every step family moved through. So we wanted to create something that was general enough that every step family could get something out of it,
Yeah.
but specific enough so that it wasn't, it's just like they couldn't create their own ideas.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
needed to have some specific aspects to it. So in the process, though, we kind of recreated the name because,
Okay.
for one, we don't really care what a ministry is called: step family, blended family, bonus family, whatever.
Right.
There's a lot. I know you just
No bonus.
Deanna's
I'm
not
not
afraid
a
of bonus.
I don't know about bonus.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm not a blend mom.
My daughters don't see her as a bonus mom. Well, they didn't back then. They might
Yeah.
today, but,
Yeah.
but back then they didn't. And so actually it was Deanna that came up with a new terminology that we utilize ourselves, but we use everything interchangeably. But
Yeah.
that's merge, MERGE. And if you think about the merged family, if you think about a road sign where traffic is merging, you've got two traffic patterns coming together, two
Yeah.
families that started in separate areas
Yeah.
that are coming together and they're trying to form one. And that was a kind of a term that was just like, yeah, gosh,
Yeah.
we love that.
Yeah.
We love that. And actually I wasn't on board at first, but then the
No.
more we thought about it, the more I really liked that terminology. So we're not trying to recreate anything, we're not trying to make it like, let's get rid of step family.
No.
But part of it was because the term step family, everybody thinks Disney, the wicked stepmother,
Right.
Everything
Yeah.
step is negative when you
Yeah.
refer to step relationships.
Yeah.
Blended is more popular today than step.
Yeah.
But even that, when you think about blended, go for it.
I was working on staff at a church, and I said, hey, I need an image of a blended family. And what I got was an interracial family.
Yeah.
And so there was the confusion of what is a blended family.
Yeah.
And people in other countries actually said, so a blended family, that's where like they're interracial, right? And it's like, okay, blended's probably not going to work outside
Right.
of America.
Right.
And we don't want to just keep it in America because sadly, in our travels, we have seen that Western culture of divorce is moving into other cultures where marriage was very, very important before.
Yeah.
And it's almost like, well, if the Americans can do it or the Europeans can do it, then we can do it too.
Yeah.
Which is detrimental to the health of the family.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
So I mean, to your point, right? Like even thinking about the whole merge sign, right? And it's like you can have some really nasty traffic merging situations, right?
Sure.
That cause all kinds of accidents and injuries, right? But then if you all know how you're navigating, where you're going, the speed at which is acceptable to go, right? Like it just makes so much sense in my head as you're talking about that. As far as, so here's a curriculum that we're laying out that kind of helps kind of work through some of these details that is really going to be supportive to the merging of these families together. And so will you share a little bit about what do the letters stand for in merge family?
Yeah, absolutely. So the M in merge stands for managing expectations.
Okay.
There's a lot of expectations that people bring into a marriage. Even a first marriage, you bring in some expectations. Maybe the bride-to-be has this ideal of, having this wonderful fairy tale wedding.
Yeah.
There could be a lot of expectations. But there's expectations that we have coming into a merged family as well. And so it's identifying those expectations. What are the expectations that you struggle with? And we list several expectations that we go through within the class. So identifying what you struggle with and then learning how to deal with those expectations.
Yeah.
How do you manage them properly? How do you then surrender those expectations?
Yeah.
And surrendering is such a negative word for people. Managing is more palatable.
Yeah.
But it's real. You do want to be able to manage what's going on around you, right? Because we can't all live in total chaos. We know that doesn't work well for any family dynamic or individual.
Right.
And so being able to manage yes, there is an ideal that maybe we'll be able to reach, but maybe with our kind of family, we will never be able to reach. And we need to be okay
Yeah.
if we're different.
Yeah.
We can have a different ideal, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think even thinking in as a stepchild working, working within the context of two different merged families that I was going back and forth with, right? There was all kinds of unspoken expectations that we're trying to navigate, and people getting upset and frustrated with as far as when things weren't happening the way that they want. And it would just create so much tension, right? And so what even a helpful thing as far as going, okay, I have these expectations. I become aware of them, and then how can I negotiate these in a healthy way, or maybe set some of them aside? Mm-hmm. That would have been so beneficial. Me growing
because
up,
I'm sure you felt like as a child. Let's say you were with one parent Monday through Friday, and the other parent on the weekends, right? So let's say you lived in Japan, Monday through Friday, and you spoke Japanese, and you wore a kimono, and you know, and you ate sushi, right?
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden on Friday during your transition day, you were in, I don't know, pick a country.
Yeah,
Mexico.
Right, Mexico.
So now you're speaking Spanish and you're eating tacos, and you know, there's a different dress code and there's different rules.
Yeah.
So as this kid goes transitioning from one home to another, it is really like going from one country or one culture to another.
Yeah.
And those two homes may never align to be exactly the same.
Right.
Chances are they won't. I mean, it's very slim if they can even resemble each other.
Right.
But for that child, just knowing what the rules are, because the parents have better expectations.
Yeah. Yeah. And so managing expectations by surrendering the M. What's next in that curriculum?
E. So the E is going to stand for educate. So we want to educate ourselves as parents first, right?
Yeah.
We do this by training ourselves. Think, well, I'm a parent. I'm already a parent. Why do I need training on being a parent? It comes from the idea of when you're on an airplane and you're traveling. If there's a drop in cabin pressure, you're going to have the masks drop, right?
Yeah.
Who puts the mask on first? The parent,
right.
So then they can be breathing air to assist the others around them, right? Their children or their spouse or whoever. So it's very much the same way. We want to train and educate the couple that is leading the step family, so parent and step parent, to train themselves to understand what their own expectations are, because a lot of times we don't even recognize that we have these expectations.
Yeah.
Training to understand it, so then they can turn around, train the family unit, right?
Yeah.
So those are all the kids, whether they're full-time kids, part-time kids, kids coming in and out, adult kids, an hours baby or a glue baby, you know, the together.
Yeah.
And so because there's so many dynamics, education is key to that. And we really rely on the fruit of the Spirit, right, to use this training.
Okay.
But I will say that as a new stepmom, I did not love his children unconditionally like I loved my daughter. And I know a lot of stepmothers and probably stepfathers feel the same way, but with society, we're not allowed to say that. Well, we haven't had the same time. Like Steve had his girls from birth, right? I hadn't had them from birth. They came in at 9, 12, and 14 and a half.
Yeah.
And so even though I knew them beforehand, I didn't know them to the level that Steve knew them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it doesn't always start with love. It starts with self-control.
Okay.
And so if you take the fruit of the Spirit, you flip it upside down, you start with self-control and you work your way towards love.
Super interested in that. And I know we're kind of just doing a brief overview, but for those of you that are like, wait, can we talk a little bit more about that? We're actually going to do some follow-up podcasts with each one of these letters to kind of go in a little bit more detail.
Right.
And so I'm super excited about to talk about that. But to your point, again, thinking about how I mentioned at the beginning that this could be very helpful to the children. And it's one of those things I think about where it's like a quote that a developmental psychologist once said is, you cannot give your child what you yourself don't already have, right? And so it's like, if you don't know how to navigate this in a healthy way and understand how we're supposed to lead ourselves through this tension and all these difficult kind of circumstances, how am I going to help my child navigate through this in a healthy way? And so educate by training ourselves, and we use kind of the fruit of the Spirit. So MER. So what's the R? Yeah.
R is to recognize.
Okay.
Okay. There are some things that we need to recognize, actually, to also embrace. By recognizing aspects of our step family, we can then embrace things. And we talk about recognizing where you're at within a step family.
Yeah.
And we talk about 3 phases.
Okay.
We talk about a crisis phase, a stable phase, and a healthy phase. And within that class, what we want to do is by recognizing where we're at, then we can else embrace where we're at. But then we can, once we've embraced where we're at, we can also then look to bettering our step family so that we can move to another phase.
I love that. Yeah. I think about oftentimes when I'm going through a crisis time, like usually I'm like, okay, this is just a season. I'm going to get through this, right? And so like I love that, right? Where it's just like, okay, this is where we're at as a step family, and we have to embrace that and then but have tools also to kind of navigate.
And that's important too,
Yeah.
because we do, in every class, we want to give tools for people to be able to do that, whether it's in
Practical tools.
Practical
That you
tools,
can
right?
take
Yeah.
home
Yeah.
that night and actually implement.
Start working on.
Yes.
Yeah.
We talk a lot about developing your toolbox. That's what
Yeah.
we're trying to do, is we're helping people put tools into their toolbox. It's not up to us to take the tools out and use them.
Yeah.
We're going to help them fill it, but they've got to be the ones that get the tools out and put them to work, put them to use.
Cool. So MERG. So
Get ready.
Get ready.
Get
All right.
ready.
Okay.
So this came from the idea of preparing, and in a merged family, you need to prepare for the past, the present, and the future.
Okay.
Right. So that sounds like, how do I prepare for the past? It's already in the past.
Yeah.
There may have been things from your past that are going to pop out of the closet and potentially influence your family or affect your family in some way in the future, right? So it's really taking an inventory of going back and finding out what those things may be.
Yeah.
And when the time is right, age appropriate, etc. Those may have to be discussions that you're going to have with your children or your new spouse or your ex-spouse. And then we continue to go on to prepare for today.
Yeah.
Those things that are constantly popping up. And then in the future, we've got weddings, and birthdays don't stop and Christmases don't stop just because the kids are 18.
Oh, I know I've talked a little bit about Steve about the get ready thing. And I just, even my own experience, I'm like, wow, how helpful would that have been if my parents would have been a little bit more prepared and regulated for themselves instead of having to deal with all the negotiations the day before, the week before, right, the day of, right? And it's like that could have influenced, I think there's so many children that would benefit from that getting ready. And so there is this sense of like, no, we're going to be courageous and we're going to prepare to help ourselves and our children just have the best experience we possibly can in this unideal situation. It's like, yeah.
Well, in the prepare class too, what it really begins to do is it starts to shift our focus away from ourselves and onto our children. Now, throughout the whole time, we're always trying to give a perspective of the children as well, as best as we can.
Yeah.
Neither of us grew up as stepchildren or merged children. But we are a step family as parents, and so we know that perspective, but we don't know the children's as well. And so what we've learned from our own kids, we try to implement as much of that as we possibly can to give a perspective to people about, look, we need to also take into consideration what the kids are going through and what they're feeling. But it's really in the prepare class that we really start to get into that more. It's putting the focus on the children.
Makes a lot of sense. So get ready. And then E, what's the final E stand for?
So the final E is encourage.
Okay.
And it's a quicker class. It's a shorter session within the class structure, but I think it is a vitally important one. And I think when you think about it, as far as encourage, think about it in terms of sharing.
Yeah.
Sharing your story about your life in a step family.
Yeah.
If you put it in terms of your faith, the more you share your faith, not only are you encouraging others, but builds encouragement within yourself.
For sure.
It strengthens your faith even more, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So if you think about that in the same terms within our step families, is that when we share our story with other step families, it strengthens and encourages us as well.
Yeah.
So we want to encourage others, and in the process, we're encouraging ourselves.
I love that. Like, I think about how many times when we ourselves are vulnerable about an experience of where we have been and where God has taken us, right? Like it really gives encouragement to others. It strengthens others. It also is like a perfect antidote to shame, right? If it's like, I'm alone, I've messed up, right? And then you have respect for a couple like you, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh my goodness, you have walked the same path that I am, right?
Yeah.
And so there is this sense of encouragement, this just shame killer that it's just like, man. And so I'm again so excited about what we have to share with all of you out there. And so again, if you know you have loved ones that you know that are in a merged family, a step family, a blended family, especially even if they're kind of in the newer phases of that, Arizona Family Counseling, Christian Family Care, our mission is strengthening families and serving at-risk children in the name of Jesus Christ. And so I'm thinking about like, this is for you. And so please stay tuned. We're going to actually go through a few other podcasts and kind of dive a little bit deeper into each one of these. Also stay tuned. We will actually have a course on our Family Care Learning platform to kind of take as a family or as a small group that you can kind of lead others through. And so we are just so excited. If you find that you are in a step family or blended family and you're in the thick of it and you're struggling, but I want to encourage you also to check out Arizona Family Counseling, because we have therapists like Steve that have incredible experience supporting families as they navigate all of the intricacies of marriage life, family life, and we want to support you. Thanks for joining us. Check out the links below, and we'll see you next time.